Okay, so today is 3:53, so it's Monday, December 17th, 2018. This is Raphael Garcia back for an edition of Let's Talk Wrestling. This is episode 6, and I'm on the road, actually traveling, heading to Honduras, and I wanted to get this show up before I left the country because didn't want to end this year without doing a show for this topic. Coming off of what was an excellent TLC. I just got done watching that and getting caught up on that amazing show. And yeah, if you're a professional wrestling fan, be sure to go back and watch that because the show, I mean, it was good from start to finish. I enjoyed it. Didn't enjoy Seth versus Dean so much. And also, I want to apologize for the background noise because people in the airport, it's 4 o'clock in the morning and they're talking like they're not standing 2 feet away from each other. But that's neither here nor there. But yeah, so we're on the heels of a big TLC, which was a pretty damn good show. Like I said, everything was good. I enjoyed it all except for the Seth and Dean match. I just think that that's another addition of bad storytelling and booking from the WWE. And the Rey Mysterio Randy Orton match could have been more. I wish Andre Almas was in that match instead, but I'm not in charge. It's neither here nor there. But anyway, one of the big things about these types of events, whether it be MMA or professional wrestling in any way, shape, or form, is that the show will always be remembered based upon its main event. And looking at what we saw Sunday night, the main event of Asuka, Charlotte, and Becky Lynch definitely delivered. It excelled and is continuing the trend of us seeing women excel in professional wrestling and run circles around the men. I mean, they just run circles around them day in and day out. And this is just yet another example of them being better than what the guys have to offer. And they're doing it regardless of the hurdles that are put in their way. They're just excelling, and it's great to watch. It's great to be a part of that and a part of this continued revolution. I hate to use the term women's revolution, but to be a part of it and to be watching it as a fan is definitely an enjoyable moment. But that's not why we're here on today's show because we're talking about the small men in professional wrestling, and this is on the heels of Mustafa Ali being front and center on last week's edition of SmackDown, where he faced off against Daniel Bryan in a losing effort. But there's more to take away from that situation rather than Mustafa just getting touted out there and losing because it was a big moment for the cruiserweights, and it should hopefully draw attention to the 205 Live product, where, in my opinion, a lot of the best wrestling in WWE has gone down. And it's actually interesting because as I was working on this episode, working on the agenda, a lot of the best wrestling that's been created this year and within the last couple years have come from men that were less than 200 pounds. Whether it's the Pete Dunne Tyler Bate matchup from last year, Almas and Gargano from this year, Almas and Ciampa, all those matches, anything Ricochet has done, Ali and Buddy Murphy, all these matches of men who weigh 205 pounds and less have continuously upstaged the matches of bigger men like Brock Lesnar and Braun Strowman or Randy Orton or Roman Reigns. Seth Rollins is an outlier almost at this point in time because it looks like the smaller guys are continuously doing what they need to do to get over, not only get over as a character, but get over as a performer in the ring. And I just wanted to acknowledge that and talk about that during today's topic because I think it's time that we begin to kind of look at that. And it's always been clear that professional wrestling is the land of the giants. I mean, I was looking at this agenda and putting together a list of names of just giant men who were central to professional wrestling when I began watching it, and they were the attractions. I mean, you had Andre the Giant, King Kong Bundy, Hulk Hogan, the Ultimate Warrior, The Undertaker, The Big Show, Kane, Giant Gonzalez, etc., etc. I remember when Zeus was brought over from that horrible Hulk Hogan movie just because he was big and it was a big draw. And The list continues to go on and on to today, where it's big men who were huge bodybuilder type or just big athletic men. I'm not even gonna say athletic, it's big, overly sized, gigantic men who lumbered their way into the ring and got pushed to the moon, oftentimes based solely on the fact that they were much, much bigger than the average man. And it was a belief that the fact that they're bigger than what average men would see, what you would see walking around the street or in an airport like I am today, that made them a draw and it made them an attraction. And in many ways, that's not necessarily the case. While their size and stature translated well to the world of television, and it helped captivate fans and kept them turning in and attending live shows. That's what made Andre the Giant so spectacular. I mean, he was labeled the eighth wonder of the world for a reason because he was a giant of a man at that point in time. Same thing with the Big Show. He's an attraction. I still every time I've gone to a professional wrestling event with someone who doesn't watch wrestling and they see someone like a Braun Strowman, they see someone like a Big Show, and they are immediately captivated, like, oh my God, this guy's huge. Yeah, they see the big muscular guys. I remember a couple years back, my ex and I went to go to Extreme Rules, I think it was, where the New Day faced the Wyatt family, and she was so impressed with um, she was so impressed with Big E until she saw Braun Strowman. Like, Jesus, he's just a giant. So, but I digress. But what about the smaller guys, the guys of average size, or even worse, the smaller men? They may not be a main attraction when it comes to a lot of different things, but smaller men, but smaller men have a place in professional wrestling. I mean, these are guys who I was working on a piece earlier today about Bandito. I didn't realize he was only 5'7", 185 pounds. So smaller men do have a place in professional wrestling, and while they may not be the main attraction all the time, they do draw because they do offer something that these big lumbering giants cannot offer. So this isn't just about cruiserweight wrestling. This is about the idea that guys do not have to be 300-pound ripped and lumbering giants. Remember, there was a time when Bret Hart who stood 6 foot 235, was considered too small to be a main event champion. Shawn Michaels, who was barely 6 foot 220, too small to be a main event draw. So many individuals were not big enough, for lack of a better term. I mean, we always are going to point to Rey Mysterio, who's probably the greatest cruiserweight of all time, probably one of the greatest wrestlers of all time. His whole shtick was being smaller than everyone else, and he got that over to a point where he became a 3 or 4 time WWE champion. So he's held those titles, and he's been pushed to prominent positions just because of the fact that he can go in the ring. He's been able to go with just about anyone. But thankfully, what we're if you look around wrestling today, there are continued big men that are getting over. Lars Sullivan, and funny because I mentioned Lars Sullivan, but he doesn't even fit into the rest of this group. But Keith Lee, Brian Cage, Walter, Jeff Cobb, these are all bona fide monsters that are were recently, well, some were recently signed to WWE, some are with other promotions, but they're big men that can get that have a different type of style in the ring. There's something that's different from them than the Giant Gonzalez's who could barely move back in the day. But I did a little bit of research and did some digging in the PWI 2018 list, the top 10, and I found some pretty interesting numbers. Of on this list, Braun Strowman is the only big man. He's the only man that's over 300 pounds, and he's the only man that's over 6'5". He's standing 6'8", 385. Brock Lesnar is also on this list, but he's 6'3", 286. Everyone else is 235 and oh, excuse me, I forgot. Roman Reigns is 6'3", 265. So that's three men now that are above 250. Everyone else is 225, 235 and below. Okada's at 236. Everyone else is 235 and down. AJ Styles and Tetsuya Naito are both under 6 feet, and it shows that the best workers, and yes, PWI isn't kayfabe. It is what it is, but it shows that the best workers in this industry tend to be of a certain size, tend to be of a certain ilk, because they are the ones who can show up and deliver week in, week out in the ring. And I think that that's what needs to be recognized as we talk about size in professional wrestling. While you may be taught that size matters in the dating world and what you're doing in the bed, size doesn't always matter when it comes to professional wrestling. Well, I'm not gonna say size doesn't always matter. Size doesn't always. It shouldn't limit your ceiling or your room for growth in professional wrestling. And what's interesting is that today's industry is different than even when I was growing up. I'm 34 years old, 35 next month, and it's changed in a way where the style of wrestling is different. Back then, it was much more mat based, technical style. Even the cruiserweights had an element of ground technical work that you don't always see today, but that style was prevalent. It was front and center, and that has changed over time because now we're at an era where it's more of a spot fest style wrestling, and I don't mean that in a disrespectful way when it comes to anyone, because I am a fan of spots. I'm not one of these Randy Orton individuals who hate on flips, or not one of the individuals of the revival talking about flips, no what fists, no flips, whatever the hell their catchphrase is. I am a fan of that style of wrestling. But that style where spots after spots after spots fits the athletes who are more mobile, more flexible, smaller, quicker, the more agile types that you see on. I remember specifically back in the matches that Psychosis and Rey Mysterio had in ECW. I think this was only 5 or 6 years after Rey Mysterio made his professional debut, and they were brought up to ECW, and they put on a series of matches in 1995 where they just stole. Like I personally believe that those are some of the best matches of ECW's era in that time. And Juventud Guerrero was also brought up around in too, and he was actually brought into ECW before they all made their move to WCW. But that was one of the biggest acquisitions that Eric Bischoff made when he took over WCW, and that was bringing over the cruiserweights, because we saw that division give us not only Mysterio, Juventud Guerrero, Psychosis, La Parca, and others, but it also gave us names like Chris Jericho, Eddie Guerrero, Dean Malenko, Chris Benoit, so many different other men, Tuco Scorpio, so many guys that grew to become something more. And I'm not saying all those guys are on the same level, but they grew to become something more. So cruiserweights was definitely put on some of the best matches on WCW television, but they were never given a main event billing that their match quality demanded. I remember specifically the first uh, example that jumps out to mind is when Rey Mysterio was booked against Kevin Nash and ended up losing his mask to Kevin Nash. This is kind of at the height of their time in the Outsiders and being the NWO. And that is a moment in Ray's career that isn't really talked about much. I mean, even so to this day, you can find pictures of him unmasked. You can find videos of him unmasked and wrestling. I don't know if those episodes of Nitro are on the network or anything like that, but you can find content of Rey Mysterio without his mask doing what he does in the ring. But WWE almost kind of acts like that never occurred. I mean, even if you look back a couple weeks back where Randy Orton was pulling at Mysterio's mask, ripping it off, it was almost as if it was ignored that this has happened before and he's been unmasked. It's not that that's important, but it shows how the cruiserweights were booked back then. I remember the LWO where Eddie Guerrero formed a Latino World Order to kind of combat the NWO, and they obviously got stomped out like bugs. They got put out by the NWO, and never heard of them again. But what their that type of booking continued when cruiserweights moved over to the WWE years later, because what we saw is that guys like Brian Kendrick and Paul London, great tag team champions, they were kind of marginalized. They couldn't be seen as anything else. The Hardy Brothers kind of broke out from that, um, but they were on the bigger end of that spectrum as well. And it was in WWE where Jericho, Eddie, Benoit, and others kind of broke through to the main event status because their characters became bigger than just how they were placed on the WCW roster. So as that opportunity became available, these smaller guys showed that they can hang with the Triple H's, they can hang with the Rocks, they can hang with the Kurt Angles, they can hang with anyone that's put in front of them, and they did so in a way that was impressive, and it was enjoyable to watch. And as we continue to talk about this topic, it's not just within the WWE that's worth recognizing what's going on in professional wrestling when it comes to the smaller men. I mean, perhaps the most preeminent cruiserweight matchup is the match between Tiger Mask and the Dynamite Kid, Todd Billington. Rest in peace. He died last week. He died on the 5th, which is his birthday, week before last. Yeah, man, he died on his birthday. That's the part. But anyway, that is the preeminent. Their first or their second match, right? I'm not sure which exactly one. They had a series of matches, and I believe it's their second matchup that's considered the catalyst for cruiserweight wrestling kind of blowing up across the world. As I mentioned, the Rey Mysterio Psychosis series is kind of what helped kick off cruiserweight wrestling in the United States. But that Tiger Mask Dynamite Kid matchup that happened in New Japan is the grandfather of cruiserweight wrestling. If you're a fan of wrestling, you should watch that match. If you're a fan of cruiserweight wrestling, you should definitely watch that match because it's still impressive to this day what they were able to do. But what I was saying is, you see organizations such as New Japan with their Best of the Super Juniors, MLW, who has another strong group of smaller men on the roster. You see Ring of Honor with guys like Flip Gordon and Jonathan Gresham. So many others who are showing that as cruiserweights, they can compete with the best in the business. And it's not just about going out there flipping all over the place and then getting pinned in the end. They're being put in these situations and being booked to win big matches, which I think is really important. It's important for a couple of different things. I mean, you have Will Ospreay, who's probably one of the biggest independent stars in the industry right now, consistently stealing shows left and right. Their match, I think he was I think he was paired with Naito against Ibushi and Ibushi and Kenny Omega this past, or was it Tanahashi? Let me see. But I don't want to get that wrong. Yeah, I'm sorry. So it was Tanahashi, and that match gave us some of the best action of the weekend. It gave us that one highlight that's been going around of Ibushi hitting the springboard Hurricane Rana off the top rope, where Osprey flips through and lands on his feet with the great camera work that shows a shot over Ibushi's shoulder. But that's not the point of all of this. Is just that promotions around the industry are leveraging cruiserweights to give us some of the best matches night in and night out that we always see. And fans and I hope promoters continue to recognize that, because there are so many guys that deserve to be featured at the top of the card without being hindered because of their size. I mean, like I said earlier, there was a time when 6 foot 230 was not big enough. It wasn't. And imagine if that idea was still in place, we wouldn't have Seth Rollins, we wouldn't have The Miz, we wouldn't have Chad Gable, we wouldn't have Dolph Ziggler, we wouldn't have Finn Balor, we wouldn't have Andre Almas, we wouldn't have Kofi Kingston, Ty Dillinger, so many other individuals that we would not have simply because they're not over 6'5", over 250, and and I never like to say, according to Vince McMahon, but according to the powers that be, that was not big enough to be a main eventer. Thankfully, we are watching in an area where we are watching at a time Ali being featured front and center on SmackDown. We can only hope that this is a continuing trend that we see in the future. I wrote a piece, I think earlier this year, about Buddy Murphy being the man or one of the individuals that should answer Seth Rollins' open call for the Intercontinental Champion. Now he doesn't have the title anymore after TLC, but I would love to see Buddy Murphy get a featured match against a face champion or Raw or SmackDown, or just get a featured match there. Period. You can even tie that into Mustafa Ali and their continuing feud against one another. But what made that moment so special was that it was pre-announced. It wasn't just something that was sprung on us. That day was announced earlier in the afternoon, and that caught my attention. That immediately made me think, "Hey, I want to watch this. I want to see this." So that caught my attention, and I know it caught the attention of a lot of other people as well because it pretty much blew up. And I'm looking forward to seeing. I haven't looked back and saw what the ratings were from that segment, but it had a good rumble of interest across social media. So I'm hoping it did well. But that happened, and the cruiserweights were pushed right back to the pre-show on for TLC, which is a miscalculation in my step because they could have moved some stuff around and kept them on a main card spot. But hopefully, this leads into more of the cruiserweights being featured on Raw and SmackDown. I would love to see them given an opportunity to shine from time to time with the goal to push eyeballs back to the 205 Live segment. I mean, just think back to what the Cruiserweight Classic was and how great of a showcase that was of the cruiserweights when they were as a part of that tournament. I still remember that. I've been meaning to go back and rewatch that, but those were some of the best matches of that year. I remember Brian Kendrick hitting that ridiculous burning hammer on Kota Ibushi. All of Kota's matches. I didn't like the semifinals and the finals too much, but Zack Sabre Jr. doing the damn thing, Cedric Alexander getting signed, so many different moments. But while there's a lot to complain about what's going on in pro wrestling today, the continued development of cruiserweights in the smaller minute industry is something to be happy about, something to enjoy watching. If you don't, go watch 205 Live because it's definitely some of the best WWE content that you can see. The whole goal is at the end of the day, we got to get these guys placements so fans can witness what they do in the ring each and every week, and then potentially become bigger fans down the line. But with that in mind, I want to go ahead and close out this week's show. Thank you for listening. Always be sure to like and share our MMA ratings content, where you can always find our content at MMAratings.net obviously on the website, but you can follow us there on Instagram and Twitter as well. Please be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel, like and share our content because that helps us grow, that helps us gain attention and notoriety, and that's what we are here to do. In 2019, I expect some pretty big things, and hopefully we can continue to add content to our platform. But with that in mind, I apologize again for all of the background noise, and everyone have a great day. We will not have any shows until early 2019, and be sure to be safe over the holidays and have a great time, everyone.